If you had a quarter-ounce gold sovereign coin from England 100 years ago or 200 years ago or today, it buys the finest meal for three, including a bottle of wine, no matter where you are in all.
There we go.
Welcome to Citizens for Sound Money. I'm here leading the charge today, which is unusual, but I'm Marian Ward, our executive director. I'm here with Jim Forsythe, our chair of the board. And we got a couple guys from Preferred Coin Exchange, Jim Plankers and Eric Harmon. I'm going to get it right. And we're going to talk about what they do over at Preferred Coin Exchange, but really get into kind of I found them to be a very mission-minded organization, very much in line with what we're doing at Citizens for Sound Money. So let's get into that part of it. You want to talk about what does sound money mean to you and why is it important?
All right, so sound money, I'm Eric, by the way. Welcome, everybody. Sound money, to me, I come from a family that has been focused on alternative assets for 4 generations. Sound money, to me, means that we're not dependent on others. I learned about collectible coins as a young man, and growing up, I started learning the value of these type of alternative assets, and really started to learn about dependency or independency when it comes to personal wealth and providing and raising a family. So we are fired up because we have now, with a few decades under our belts as adults, we see the importance in having that independence and creating your own wealth. So,
great. Jim, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Sure. I'm Jim Plankers. I'm sales director over here at PCE, Preferred Coin Exchange. And I don't have the extensive background for Eric, but between the three of us, Brian, Eric, and I, probably 50, 60 years of collecting. If you go back his generations, we could go even deeper. But I've been in numismatics for almost 10 years now. But prior to that, I was one of the sheep, unfortunately. I had no exposure or awareness of the diminishing value of the dollar and how really horrible the fiat currency is. And yet it's on an extended run. We're beyond 50 years, which most fiat currencies don't last that long if you look at historically. So very much on board with the sound money and why it's critical to individuals, not just investors, not just collectors, but everybody. So we're really excited to be here and sharing this time with you all.
Yeah, I do want to mention Preferred Coin Exchange is a for-profit company, but I really believe they're sort of mission-oriented first, and that I've learned firsthand. Also, disclosure: Jim Plankers is my coin guy, so I've started working personally with. That's how much I believe in what they're doing, and how much I think they line up with the ideal of sound money and getting out of sort of the paradigm of the current system. But why don't you guys explain to us how Preferred Coin Exchange came to be and sort of your big vision and mission of what's going on there?
Okay, so Preferred Coin Exchange is an extraordinary story. Number one, we all worked with each other at a very large collectible coin company in the past, and what really inspired us to go this route was we were all client-driven individuals, and more so than we were company folks. And we all, there's several of us that were involved in the not so much the creation of Preferred Coin Exchange, but to get it to this point today with the passion that we had on our individual goals. And some of those were, we noticed that a lot of people make mistakes in this industry, and being in specifically the collectible segment, we know that in troubled times or where the markets are volatile, that we see a lot of folks being forced into things that didn't meet their expectations, and they'd land in our market, which was collectibles. And so what we wanted to do is get the opportunity to get outside of our company and educate those folks that were interested in learning about sound money. And if we could do that, we would love to do that in the years that usually paper is selling really well, and we have confidence in our government, banking system, and infrastructure for investing. And then if we ever ran into another turbulent market, we would have done our job as far as educating folks on the differences in the different aspects of precious metals. So one thing I wanted to say really quick is, in volatile markets, people focus on alternative assets and they start with precious metals, but they accidentally cross over into collectibles. And what we wanted to do was educate them about numismatics and find out their expectations and match the products to what their expectation is. And if there's any areas to grow education and to expose other opportunities to them, we wanted to basically reveal the entire market to them.
Can you, just for clarification, can you define kind of collectibles, numismatics, and maybe some examples?
Yes, I'd love to do that. So number one, when we get the opportunity to work with individuals one-on-one, we ask them ultimately, they start out with some type of expectation. So we noticed that a lot of people back 12 years ago were investing in precious metals. And what we realized was precious metals is the most powerful item to own when protecting as a hedge against these fiat currencies. And like Jim mentioned, our fiat currency is way overdue for a change. So when folks are looking for more, and what happens is as a bullion segment, if they get into government issued coins, they start gaining a curiosity about collecting. And it's based on a couple of Silver Eagles, for example, the most recognized coin of any of the viewers today. After buying a couple of Silver Eagles 3-4 years in a row, they start noticing dates. So that falls into collecting, and collecting is basically government issued coinage. Then there are commemoratives and privately minted coins or metals. What numismatics is that's where collectors go investment minded. And all that is, and if we get time on this record, we'll get into some of the must-haves when targeting collectibles or numismatics. But all numismatics is a very small portion of government issued coins that are the rarest basic years and issues for collectors. It's basically the stumbling blocks that they find tough to complete entire collections. So this is what investors typically target.
Well, I was actually going to ask that next. I was going to quiz Jim Plankers on the 5 principles that you guys because I don't remember all of them. You want to tell us, Jim, what are the 5 principles you're looking for?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll list them off and then we can kind of expand on them. Yeah. So in no particular order, because they're all very critical. You want it to be a government issued, fully regulated major coin program. You want it to be low to mid market price, not the peak, which is what's unfortunately with US coins, they peaked about 10 years ago. You want it to be graded by one of the top 2 grading services. They're the only ones that we fully trust to be accurate and reliable. That's NGC or PCGS, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, professional coin grading service, and that's where you get into the numismatic. 4th thing, you want to have a huge international audience with low supply and high demand. That's kind of economics 101, but it has to be stated because it's a must. And then the final thing, you want to have highest grader, finest known. This is prior to the digitization of mints, and you're going to want to target the key, which means the top or semi-key dates. Those are your top 5 must-haves for an investment grade quality coin. So Eric can expand on all of those, as can I. So I think I'll kick it over to him unless you have a question to follow up on that.
Yeah, so one thing I'll want the audience to know too. Now, this is separate from the right to own precious metals as a hedge against all foreign currencies, including our own domestic US dollars. So when 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 you're in that category, in that mindset, and you're preserving wealth rather than currency, everything is acceptable, from bars to ingots to privately minted rounds to government issued coins. So I want to make sure that's stated, because when you leave that and get into collectibles by accident or as a beginning collector, the 5 must-haves do apply, but a lot of the time we have intrinsic value and interest that can get us in trouble in that collectible segment. And that would be, for example, if you were a golf fan and all of a sudden you see a private mint issuing, a fully licensed golf series, that's only going to have intrinsic value to the person that's collecting it, but there is no big market for it, even though golf has a giant market. So with government issued and fully regulated coins, what that does to protect consumers in collecting, and definitely numismatics, is these are fully regulated. There's one coin program that we're really specific to right now because it has not let anybody down in the last 4 decades. And that is the elusive panda program out of China, which was created by Americans. So anyway, what that does is they have 4 major entities regulating that entire coin program. So when they issue coins for 2023 next year, they have a hard stop on what they can mint prior to minting the very first 2023 gold panda. The US is a little different from all these major world mints, and people don't usually find out about this information until at least 10 years deep into collecting coins. So this is important information that everybody would love to have up front. So you got that full protection when it's government issued. And then Jim talked about the grading and so on and so forth, but I wanted to get to what the target is. And so a lot of people, here's the mistake that everybody accidentally makes because they don't have the education up front. And most of the coin dealers in the United States operate in this fashion. When somebody's learning about collectibles and they're going above and beyond the understanding of the value of precious metals, it's really difficult to understand this extra intrinsic value that collectibles and numismatics bring. And so when we're working with folks, they usually start off with, and most of the companies out there will start folks off with a freshly struck coin, because it's mass produced, especially with precious metals being the target that they are right now. And they're the closest priced coins to the value of precious metal. So it's easy with the lack of confidence to oversee that and feel comfortable purchasing. So a fine example would be a Silver Eagle. As we always, I've been in the business for 23 years as a collector, but professionally advising for 12. So going back, I think, to 2012, what we saw was, as people stepped away from a plain Silver Eagle as the right to own an ounce of silver, they started getting into graded Silver Eagles. And so when they started out with Silver Eagles, they would buy the most current, inexpensive coins. So to give an example, back in 2013, silver was at $35 an ounce. You could buy the finest Silver Eagle for collecting from that same year for $149. That was the most expensive collectible coin from that year. But what most people didn't realize, it was one of the most mass-produced mintages of the entire 30-some years of Silver Eagle. But they were comfortable. So as they start collecting backwards, when you get to the mid-90s, so something that Jim had mentioned, finest known, rarest, what that means is key date and semi-key date is the terminology that collectors and investor collectors use. All that means is key date is the rarest out of a giant government-issued program with the same design or major program. And then semi-key date would be the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th rarest years. So just to give you an example on a Silver Eagle, 1995 for proof is a super rare year. That's always been a stumbling block for collectors and investors. And then for the business strikes, it's 94, 95, 96 are years that are stumbling blocks. So if you don't start with those and don't find out about them for 10, 15 years into collecting or investing, by the time you get to those, they're the most expensive and hardest coins to find. And so what we do at PCE is target those coins first, show as example. It's nice to see what their values are currently, because if you don't focus on something like that immediately and don't find out about it for 10, 15 years to come, the values of these are always growing, and they're usually the most valuable in their coin segment.
And I can interject here. My memory isn't as great as it used to be, but I met Eric shortly after he started at the company he mentioned. We all worked together there. When I started there in 2013, the finest known, as he mentioned, Silver Eagle, which was extraordinarily common, but it was a 70 grade, meaning that's as good as it gets, was retailing at $149. Okay. And it was mass produced, right? But 1996 Silver Eagle, the rarest, which I think is what, Eric, 3.6 million, roughly, a little over.
Yep.
But that's very small when you look at the number of like 47 million is where it peaked, I believe. That year is so hard to find that we were selling a brilliant uncirculated ungraded coin for $149. So that gives you some perspective on what rarity can do for value in the marketplace.
You're muted, Jim Forsythe.
Sorry. One thing you said, Eric, kind of jumped out at me. You were talking about, and you know, I've never really been into numismatics or collectibles. You know, I've always tried to get bullion at the cheapest price possible, kind of thing. But you talked about the differentiation between protecting your wealth versus protecting your currency. You elaborate on that a little bit more?
I sure can. So one thing I mentioned that I had 4 generations of physical asset targeting in my family, and I won't get deep into that, but what I'll tell you is one of the first lessons my father sat me aside. So I'm 48 years old. I was born in 1974, but my dad gave me this analogy from 1971. And it can be 1970 through 1974. But my father sat me down and said, son, I just want to prepare you as you start to put away money, you know, in your early 20s, to prepare to be a husband and have a family someday. And he told me that you can put away a dollar bill or an ounce of silver, which would have been the Morgan silver dollar, which isn't quite an ounce, but just for comparison's sakes. And fast forward that to today. And today you can't buy a third of a gallon of gas with a dollar bill, but with an ounce of silver, you can still buy 5 gallons of gas. In fact, today you can buy more than 5 gallons of gas. So he was showing me that if I put $100 away or $1,000 away, whether it was savings in a bank or savings in an envelope, you know, in my dresser, I am buying way less. I've lost all its buying power, you know, within 5-10 years. And we're seeing inflation at the highest rate in American history, especially in the 52 years of our fiat currency not being backed by a physical commodity. So another one that really hit me huge was we talk about how gold works against inflation. And both of these are solid instruments. But if you had a 1/4 ounce gold sovereign coin from England 100 years ago or 200 years ago or today, it buys the finest meal for 3, including a bottle of wine, no matter where you are in all 3 time periods. But if you had $340, I mean, imagine what $340 100 years ago bought versus 200 years ago. So precious metals has always seemed to move perfectly, and in some instances better, with inflation than the currencies that aren't backed by commodities. When they're not backed by commodities, that's why they lose their buying power. The one last thing I wanted to say is the longest standing currency in the world is the British pound sterling. It's been around for, I think, about 330 years now. It has 1% of its buying power left, but our fiat currency, the US dollar in 71, I mean, some people argue back to 64, but that's coinage when it went away from silver and started using plank jets to make the coins. But 1971, when gold went off the standard, we have less than, I would argue, less than 2% of our original buying power from 1971 with the US dollar, which is scary. So what that means is if you put $1,000 away in 1971 and pulled it out today, it's literally buying $10-20 worth of, or $100-200 worth of product. Scary.
I thought you were saying something in terms of distinguishing between doing collectibles as a way to protect your currency versus bullion as a way to protect your wealth. Or did I
Perfect.
misunderstand you?
Yep. Sorry about that. But so the two most important things, in my opinion, because I'm a physical asset kind of guy, is owning precious metals and then owning numismatics. And the difference between the two is I I think it's safe to say we all believe in and understand today that precious metals are manipulated. I don't believe they're going to be manipulated for much longer. We all believe that silver and gold should be of much higher value. Put that to the side when folks, so that is basically preserving your buying power for years to come. For those that are investment minded, that want to grow their wealth. So if I'm putting away $100 and I want to put it away and expect it to grow in the future, that is numismatics. And a lot of people think that collectibles do that as well, and collectibles don't. So saying that numismatics is virtually less than 1% of collectibles because they're the same looking type of coinage. It's just those targeted rare coins and in top conditions. Those are the ones that are targeted to grow your wealth. The other remaining collectibles, so like a silver eagle, there are 5 good years. Outside of those good years, collectors are fine with losing money because what they're out to pursue is an entire collection. So when folks are investing into silver eagles, they need to stay in that small lane of just the rarest years, because those are going to be the ones always growing in value, always targeted, and always allowing collectors to be incomplete of completing their collection.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback on that, Jim, we always talk about how precious metals are a great hedge against inflation, because they have typically outpaced inflation until the last year or so. We've seen, or year plus, we've seen in my lifetime unprecedented inflation. But as a rule, it was a great way as a hedge against inflation to protect your future purchasing or buying power, right? A lot of people will say it's an investment, but truly it's not. It's a supercharged savings account, but it's a great physical asset, as Eric just touched on. Going over to numismatics and how that might give you the opportunity to grow your wealth or an increase in value, we could talk for hours. But I have a great study, some statistics I could share with you afterwards. But just in a nutshell, there was a study that compared 4 individual asset classes over a 32-year span, and the numismatic coins that they cited outperformed year over year the stock market, bonds, and bullion. So we have that kind of data. Mm-hmm.
So maybe a way to think about it is, bullion, you don't really need to know what you're doing so much. You stack it, it's going to hold its value. Numismatics is there's some speculation to it, and therefore you have to know what you're doing, and that's where you guys come in. Is
exactly.
And also you have to get in at the right time. Know what's rare and get there, as they're coming out versus, going back.
Eric can speak to this better than me, so I'll bounce it over to him after I say this. Timing isn't quite as critical as you would think. It's more about, I think, a commitment to doing it, and being in it for the long haul. It's more about the fact that you're getting something physical, an alternative asset.
Yep. And here's what's really cool. I have a couple of really good examples, if we have time to illustrate what we're talking about. But Jim is right. It's never a bad time when you're targeting numismatics. Where the bad timing comes in is when you're messing with the rest of any given coin program. So as this pertains to collectors specific, but collectors are seasoned to know that they're in it to win it with an entire collection. That's why they go that far with coins. Investors and investor collectors, they behave entirely different. So here's an example. I have the rarest gold set of what we're targeting in this specific coin program, and it is 2.5 times more valuable today than it was 3 years ago. but it's not preventing anybody from targeting it today because it's still inexpensive and a long way to grow in value. And we've seen this particular year and set for over 27 years now. So it's well established. It isn't going to change and become the fourth rarest or the fifth rarest. It's going to remain number one for life now because they're done melting this program down because it's fully, the world is fully educated that it is the true target. So, but what's really cool is I put a lot of my clients 3 years into these coins. And this was really cool because back in 2000, January 1st, 2000, this was right before we knew COVID was going to set in the United States. I had put, I won't give the name because I'm going to give some pricing and we always protect our clients on what they own. But it was a particular coin that I put everybody into for 27,000. And by August 1st in 2020, you guys will probably remember when I hit these dates and values, gold January 1st of 2020 was worth $1,601. By August 1st, it had broke a new record of just over $2,000. So in that short amount of time, it had gone up nearly $400 in 8 months. I don't think anybody would ever remember seeing that in that short amount of time in the history of gold value. Well, then after August 1st of 2020, it went back down over the next 8 months down to 1,700. So if you were investing in gold with the wrong mindset, if you're not buying the gold to preserve your future buying wealth over long term, and you were trying to invest in gold, you just lost pretty much everything you gained. That's why you don't apply the investment mind to precious metals, just the protecting against a fiat currency. So the coin I put everybody into went up 28,000 in that 8 months from 27,000. It was mind blowing. When gold came down $300 an ounce, now this was a half ounce. So on a half ounce gold coin, it had only gone up $197.50 in that short amount of time. But then it lost majority of that value in the next 8 months. That coin was discovered by more collectors and it didn't double again, but it went up about 28,000 again over the next couple months. Now that coin is impossible to find. If you find it, you can expect to pay at least $76,000. And the reason why people will continue to be willing to pay that kind of money, even when it grows to 150,000, is because that is the missing link. You cannot complete an entire collection of gold pandas without that coin. And outside of this country, specifically in China, they are creating what's called master board sets, and it includes every single 1 ounce, half ounce, quarter, 10th, and 20th ounce gold coin from 1982 to present. And so some of these key and semi-key date coins that we educate our clients on and target immediately, if my clients are getting into those and it's preventing others around the world from completing these collections, that's the kind of coin you want to own, whether you're in collecting or targeting numismatics.
Gotcha.
And something else too, Jim, that I didn't finish a thought on is that numismatics, the part of why the timing doesn't matter is primarily what we're doing with, like Eric just talked about. That's a coin from the 90s. Most everything that we touch is pre 2005 when it comes to the Panda program. So these are old coins. So that doesn't really matter, when you get in. It's about getting in. And the challenge for most collector or investors or investment minded folks is finding them. And we have an unbelievable hoard that has never been seen like this. It's I've been around it for a year, so it seems pretty ordinary and common to me, but it's not. I mean, these are ridiculously hard to find. So we've been blessed with this opportunity. We're excited to be sharing it with our clients and with folks like you. But again, it's not about timing. It's about committing to it, committing to bullion for your hedge against inflation, committing to the best numismatics. They got to be carefully selected. And that's why we feel it's part of our success is because we take a consultative approach. We are not a typical coin company. I'm going to let Eric jump on that because he loves that topic, why we're not a typical coin company.
I do. And if you guys don't have anything to share, I'll dive right in. But here, okay. So most typical coin companies want to bring their clientele something that they're familiar with, and automatically living in the United States, that's going to be US coinage without a shadow of a doubt. And that's okay for collectors to partake in, but when you're looking to grow that wealth in the future, this has been one mistake after another for 3 decades straight. But the most beautiful and common gold coin in American history is what's called the $20 Saint, or the double gold eagle, but its time frame was from 1907 to 1933. But what most people don't realize until they've already purchased a few of these is that they minted over 73 million 1-ounce gold coins in the short 26 years that program existed. We have a modern day gold eagle and a gold buffalo that's much like that. But most people don't realize that these coins are so mass produced. Living in America, we do have some amazing privileges. And one of those is the right to own gold and silver, thanks to Ronald Reagan back in 1986 when he launched this program. But going back 100 plus years ago, the vintage US gold coins, they minted way more coins back then because gold had anywhere from $16 to $20 an ounce value. And the silver coins, nobody was tucking away silver coins 100 years ago, because when currencies were tied to precious metals, specifically gold, the values didn't change. So, nobody was going to keep around an ounce of silver versus having a $1 piece of currency. And so anyway, what we've discovered is a lot of us, when we were collecting in our pioneer years, that we wanted a piece of American history, we dive in, we get a $20 Saint or an old Morgan. And then later, we find out that, man, I paid $400 for this Morgan silver dollar in a particular grade, and now it's only worth $100. How did that happen? Well, 2 things affect it. Number one is how many of them are out there, and that ties to supply and demand. But the other thing also is we don't have any melt numbers on these coins. When we finally find them out years later, we start paying attention to what's called original mintage, and you find out that millions of them were produced, not thousands. And then you find out that the US government didn't melt very many down. And the grading companies were established till 86 and 87. So we're 30 years into grading. Now we're starting to see most of these coins popping in these grades that we thought were rare 10, 15 years ago. And there's 2 things that cause drops in values on collectibles. It's more of them are discovered, and volatility in the audience that's collecting the coin. The U.S. since 1980s and 90s has dropped from the most dominating financial country in the world to, I stopped focusing on the wealth of our country 4 years ago when we were 17th or 18th ranked internationally. So our coin market has taken a beating, and Generation X, Millennials, and Zs, they weren't buying coins like baby boomers were in their 20s and 30s. They're into something totally different, and they were living paycheck to paycheck. So a lot of them jumped into digital currencies trying to grow their wealth. They're investing in many other facets, but thanks to the last 3 years, people are seeing the importance of precious metals for sure. And before they start jumping into collectibles, and then they discover numismatics way later, and most people don't, we want to educate folks on what the differences are, what the mindset should be, and then definitely focus on each and every person's expectation. What is it you're trying to achieve, and what is your goal?
That's
So I just want to, do you want to talk about why pandas? Because I was hesitant at first, right? I'm in America, and I thought, I don't want stuff coming out of China. And yes. I really did a 180 on that talking to you guys. So can you talk about that a little bit?
We can.
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, sure, Jim.
I see you get excited.
I'm excited about this one because I'm going to tell you this. 12 years ago, when I was working for the big collectible coin company, I'm dealing with all Americans, and I still am today. Folks like myself. And what's funny about that is every time we would get away from US coins, and most collectors need to focus on the entire world, but they're going to start with US coins. But when they get away, well, actually, this is way more important. What's really been going on in the United States is nobody really knew that any American involvement was connected to the Chinese Panda program. And I'll come back to that in a second. But this is what truly happened in the 80s and 90s. And these are baby boomers. As they're coming into the new millennium and learning that like $20 saints are more common than people thought, or the Morgan silver dollars, are coming out in higher grades than the threshold they had collected in, they wondered if there would be another heyday in value expansion on collectibles, on US coins. And the answer should have been yes, but the problem was they weren't focusing on the younger generations to come. So then they started looking internationally, and there are some major coin programs outside of the United States. We always talked about the 5 must-have government-issued coin programs, and that's for collectors. Then you got major world bullion producing countries as well. Some of them are the same, some of them are different. So anyway, folks like ourselves that were really into collecting wondered if we'd ever see that heyday again. And the answer did become no, and for 2 reasons. Once, our younger generations are having a tough time with this indiscretional income like the baby boomers had because of inflation. So it costs more to live today than it did in the 80s and 90s. The second thing is our US government. So we only have 2 entities controlling our US coinage, but one of them is the largest government in the world. They will not allow the United States Mint or any of the officials that regulate the mint, they will not allow them to strike rare coins. The attitude is always give Americans right to own as much precious metal as they want. What that means is, I'll use the silver eagle for example. When any other country strikes an ounce of silver, they have a set mintage, but the US is one of the only mints around the world that will keep striking the 2022 silver eagle till the last day of the year, December 30th, as long as they're still selling. So if China, for example, is limiting their 1-ounce silver panda to 10 million, and the US had a mindset of doing the same, but Americans, silver's really low this year and they're not selling it for the high premium, and people are not confident about the US dollar or the government, they're going to demand a much higher mintage. So we've seen years where they minted, 50 million silver eagles. And so coming back to the panda, then we had to start focusing on market health. So who's buying these coins? Who's in the market of this coin program? And we didn't realize that United States coins do not collect well outside of US soil. So we have an audience size between 35 million and 65 million. So we looked at some of these other international mints to look at their market audiences, and Jim, myself, Brian, that are the heads of this company, we were coin experts with Perth Mint Australia, South African Mint, the British Royal Mint. I know I'm missing one, Perth Mint Australia, if I didn't say that one already, but they didn't have big audiences like the US did, but there was something brewing in the waters. In all these other major government issued coin programs, their citizens could own gold, except for one. So remember how I mentioned earlier that the Panda program was created heavily influenced by American gold investors? Well, what many people didn't know until the last 15 years is that Chinese citizens, technically since 1949, when they went full-blown communism, it was illegal as a Chinese citizen to own gold, period. So this was an export-only program, one of the only major government-issued programs that was export-only. So in the last 15 years, American collectors were asking themselves, what would ever happen if the Chinese could own their own coin program? And if they did, that's exactly what created the heyday in the United States. So we have the modern day Gold Eagle and Silver Eagle and Gold Eagle or Gold Buffalo program. But those other coins, the vintage, so they call them US vintage coins or pre-1933 gold, those were minted from 1795 to 1933. But what a lot of people don't realize until they get deep into collecting, because our family members that lived that time period, most of them have deceased by now. But in our younger years, if we learned from them, they had gold confiscated for the last time in 1933, May 1st of 1933. We did not get the right to own gold back until January 1st, 1975. But in 1975, it was still illegal to own any of this vintage US gold. So Ronald Reagan finally approved and passed a law that it was legal for Americans to own more than 5 ounces of vintage U.S. gold. That day came in 1985, right before they launched that new modern day gold eagle program. The mirror image to what us Americans went through is China, 1949 to 2002. And in 2002, China loosened up and allowed their citizens to start buying gold. But without knowing details, we would expect a major burst in rising mintages with the panda and excitement throughout the world. It didn't happen overnight. What we didn't know until 2013 is that the government of China was charging their citizens a 17% tax. So Jim, think about this. When people are distributing silver and gold, one of the big complaints about US coins in the last 2 years is, let's just say silver's worth 22 an ounce. Why do I have to pay $37 for a silver eagle when I can buy a silver round for 24 bucks? That it created a whole bunch of chaos. Anyway, imagine paying a tax for the right to buy an ounce of silver or buy an ounce of gold. It would prevent us from owning that precious metal for sure. So the Chinese citizens were paying that tax. Plus, they were still a country riddled with they were a impoverished nation. So they went into the recession starting in 2013. We went into ours in 2008. But what happened is they recovered within a year and a half. Their government decided to remove the tax. And now we have a whole bunch of new wealthy Chinese citizens, way more than ever before, 350 million middle class now. And then you have several 400,000 new millionaires in 2015. And there's no limitations to what they can buy, no taxes. That's when all of a sudden the mintage numbers raised. And then Americans were like, wow, wonder if they'll ever want to own their first 2 decades of coinage. And if they do, 80% of them came to US. Being an export-only program in the 80s and 90s, baby boomers were so aggressive on buying gold and silver, which they were. And that's why we can enjoy the program today. There's been hoards built in this country by folks that were heavy duty gold bugs in the 80s and 90s, and they sat on those coins. So I want to go back to the vintage coins. So the reason why our coins weren't heavily melted down from the pre-1933 is, number one, our government never disclosed numbers until the last 5-10 years. And it was, I mean, the number one size coin that was melted down was the half-ounce gold coin. So it's either a $10 Liberty or a $10 Indian. They melted down 47% of those. So there are millions of those coins that still exist today. Some of them stayed in banks in the US, but we were also paying World War I debt, World War II, and a lot of those coins went to our biggest allies, France being one of them. So France held our coins instead of melting them down into bars, knowing that Americans might have the rights someday, 40 some years later, and they would distribute them back into US collections. Well, Americans are doing the same thing with the pandas for Chinese citizens. That's why we're targeting that program. And there's more to the story, but I didn't want to go too far into this, but it's the number one program and has been for 40 years. But today there's no more, the whole program is fully visible to the folks that partake in it. We're not speculative anymore. If Chinese are going to be able to own, are they going to love their own program? And prior to them getting that right, this was a major program that was not only enjoyed by Americans, but Germany was a huge consuming country of pandas, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan. Now I know Japan's been on and off with their support for China. So, but the US is always been there for the panda program. The only time it was limited, which is what created all these rarities, was in the 90s from 1989 to 2002 because of what happened in China with the Tiananmen Square massacre.
And I've got a great statistic to share that really hits home on why pandas. So Eric covered a bunch of information there. They didn't earn the right to own gold until 2002. But if you look at the mintages, there was at least a 3-year lag, and then the tax also suppressed the mintages. But we, as a company, have chosen to only focus on the gold panda side, anyways, on the gold side, from 1982 to 2005, because in 2005 is probably the last year where it stays under 60,000 of the 1 ounce gold that was minted. if you look at those 24 years from 82 to 05, okay, and that's really all we target, especially from this incredible hoard, for lack of a better word, it's that we have access to. There's 5 sizes. So you got a 1 ounce, a half, a quarter, a tenth, and a 20th. Unlike the American Eagle, which is only struck into 4 sizes, most major mints will strike 5. But so you're looking at 20 plus years of gold coinage, okay? Now the demand started small because it was export only and it was brand new. It started to grow, Tiananmen Square happens, and poof, bottom drops out of the market. Demand just withers. And again, everything was shipped here. Well, if you ignore the original mintages and look at how many survived, it's something that we call melt, okay? Or, how many survived the meltdowns. We trust that number because it comes from an individual named Peter Anthony. He's an author and publisher of a book called The Panda Buyer's Gold and Silver Panda Buyer's Guide. Great resource. It's irreplaceable for us. Bottom line, because of his relationship, Peter Anthony's, with the owner of one of these major distributors, and there are only 2, got 80% of the coins are coming to the US all that time. He shared with Peter how many he destroyed during those weak demand years, because for a couple decades, the gold panda market was just weak. And so, there he is, the owner of this large distributor of coins, sitting on thousands of inventory. And if he needed cash infusion for his business, what was he going to melt first? The Eagles, the Buffaloes, the Maple Leafs? No, he melted the pandas. And so we have very accurate data that we trust because we've seen the values and the demand that indicates that on most of these years, 75 to 90% were melted down. Now, we were mistakenly told that that's what happened to the US coinage. Well, Eric and Brian and I have discovered, no, that's not true at all, as he touched on those liberties. But we know it's true with the pandas. And here's the statistic I wanted to get to. All of those 24 years, all 5 sizes, there's only roughly 1.3 million coins that survive, not ounces, coins, out of all 5 sizes, okay? That's what survived. The first year of the American Gold Eagle, just 1 year, and just the 1 ounce in Brilliant Uncirculated was 1,365,000, just the first year. And we don't believe any have been melted down. They don't track that, but I think it's commonly accepted that they haven't been melted down, right, Eric?
That's right.
Okay,
and
that doesn't even count the proofs. There were also 435,000. There was nearly 1.8 million, is my point, struck just the first year of the gold 1 ounce Eagle. And all of the years from 82 to 05, all sizes, 1.3 million. That kind of rarity, that little statistic to me demonstrates the ridiculous rarity. I'm not even adding up the total of gold eagles that have been struck.
Now watch this. On the $20 Saint, the most famous gold coin in the U.S. history, they originally minted in those 26 years 73 million. After melting away 39%, I'd mentioned 47% earlier. That's on the $10 half ounce gold coins from 1795 all the way to 1933. But the $20 Saint alone, there are 43 million of them left. So 43 million, just one size coin, 26 years, matching up to all gold coins produced in China in 24 years. 43 million on the US $20 Saint versus 1.3 million on all 5 size coins. And that's absolutely crazy. On the silver side, because we know we have a lot of folks in the audience, we are all in love with silver. The rarest silver eagle, that they had a newer one a couple years back that was minted just slightly rarer, but the champion was 95 proof. There's 30,125 of those that they minted, and it's a long story why they had such a short mintage. It was a bonus coin in a 10th anniversary gold set, but that coin achieved $80,000+ on 6 different sales back in 2013, but very few of them were graded at that point. The rarest Silver Panda proof is 1995. There's 2,502 of them that exist out of an original mintage of 10,000. You can buy that coin in the top 2 grades in the $2,000 to $4,000 price range, and it's on its way, to what that Silver Eagle had done. But what people don't know is back in 1995 on that Silver Eagle, the gold set was $800. The Silver Eagle proof in 70 grade was only worth $200. The coin itself was probably worth $5 in 1995. That coin has never been worth more than $30,000 back in its heyday in 2013, but it's such a missing link. It caused 6 different people to pay well over $86,000 to put it into their collection. They were willing to pay 3 times more the value. But when people understand the highest value of an ounce of silver that's ever been recorded was back in July of 2011 at $49 an ounce, that is mind-blowing to think a silver coin can achieve that kind of value above and beyond its silver value. And up until last summer, the number 1 record in the United States went to our nation's first silver dollar, 1794. It was a pattern, but that held the record at $10,016,000, which was $3 million more than the gold record, which was a 1933 $20 Saint that had sold for $7.6 million. So silver in collecting and numismatics can blow minds and bring higher values than gold rarities. And the only reason why that is when you deal with silver, you have an entire audience. When you get to an ounce of gold, you've ruled out about 60% of that silver audience, because a lot of silver buyers think that they can't afford gold, in the form of an ounce. But that's a myth, because even the 10th ounce gold coin, everybody in America that has a house and pays heat in the winter or air conditioning in the summer, they can afford a 10th of an ounce of gold because it's so inexpensive.
So
Well, this has been great, Marian and Jim. Go ahead.
He's muted. He was starting to say something.
When we talked last, I think a couple of weeks ago, you guys mentioned a book. Can you want to talk about that before we wrap up? A book or a chart?
I was say, can you show it?
Yeah.
Eric has it. Eric has that book condensed to the cool. He could sell this for big bucks, I think. But
I'm gonna grab a copy of the book. Hold on.
Well, Jim grabs the book. What is very difficult, there's 2 very difficult things for folks when they're getting away from the easy understanding of precious metals and they're trying to learn about collectibles. And trust me, in the world of collectibles and numismatics, what makes big markets is published books. The more visibility on a coin program, the bigger the audience is going to be. So this book, we've read this book so many times in the 10 years it's been out. And trust me, there's over 1 million copies of this internationally. What is impossible is to read that book and see all the years in one particular view. And we knew that was a major stumbling block when we were dealing with our clients. So Jim, show them the book.
Here it is. Let me get it right here. There we go. It's kind of dark. I don't have the light that you do. I'm going to bring it over to Eric because he's got a light. Hold on.
Yes. So while he's doing that, the U.S. coins have a much similar book. But the big difference between this is Americans knew the number 1 complaint about all U.S. coins was the government never paid attention to what they melted down whenever they melted down any particular coin. The Morgan is a big disappointment. When the United States Mint decided to melt away 27 million of those coins, or no, 270 million of the Morgan silver dollar, they never paid attention to what years or what mints those coins came from. So we had to wait all these years. And I'm telling you, people got heavy into those in the 80s and 90s. But when we came close to 2010, now we had finally good enough data to find out what's out there today, because most people had submitted them for grading. And but a lot of people lost values. So here's what we did. And then there's one more. So this is going to address one major asset to having when you're spending above and beyond the value of precious metals, whether it's collectibles or numismatics, is you need to be able to target what years are the rare. So we color coded this, and yellow is the champion. So from 1982 to 2000, I stopped in the last couple years because the mintage numbers are getting so big, but we color coded in 5 different colors to target that key date. Then the semi-key dates, which are the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th rarest years. But then check this out. So you use the book as a reference, but you can't see all the years in one view. You have to go through every single page, which, Master Jedis like us have done over the course of our careers. But we need people to be able to trust themselves and their own wisdom. They don't need to take our word for it. And this is how we empower our clients.
Well, and real quickly, let me explain the chart. Tell them about the columns so they know what they're seeing. So you got years on the left side, and then across the top, you have the size of the coins.
Yep. So this is all 1 ounce, half, quarter, 10th, and 20th. Now, the backside of this page is going to blow everybody's mind. And if it doesn't, you just haven't learned enough yet, and we will take care of that, I promise you. But the most difficult thing for people that enjoy collectibles is learning how to toggle through the top 2 grading sites. So NGC that Jim mentioned earlier and PCGS are the highest authority in the world. They're both American established companies, but they have been publicly reporting the populations of every coin ever struck throughout the entire world, going back to the first coins in 650 BC. So anybody at any given time can go onto each one of these websites and target a particular coin and see how many are graded. And I'll just mention, I know there might be a lot in the audience that haven't been exposed to graded coins. It's called the Sheldon grading scale. It's from 0 to 70. And I can get into that later. But when you're trying to see coin programs, you can only see one size coin at a time by any particular country. So here, I showed you how to look at a book in one view. Here's how you look at NGC in one view. We have taken on the back side of this, every single coin. Again, we have the year, the 1 ounce, the half, the quarter, 10th, and 20th. And then these are the possibilities of how many sets can exist in the top 2 grades. And this is mind-blowing information because, just to give you an example, the rarest 1 ounce gold eagle in modern era is unfortunately the year 2001. And we remember what happened in 2001, which is why there's a low mintage. Just like on the elusive pandas that are rare, it's because of the Tiananmen Square. Well, we had the World Trade Center attack. So that particular coin, just so you know, the rarest gold panda is 1998, 1995. There's less than 4,500 1 ounce gold pandas in each one of those years. The rarest silver eagle 2001 in the identical coin, $143,605. So more than 100 times more rare. But there are tens of thousands of those coins graded. When you look at that 1995, there is less than 450 of them that have ever graded in the top 2 grades over the course of the 27 plus years that coin's been in existence. So that is, you talk about supply and demand. So 110 times more rare compared to the exact same coins on the US side. But remember, that audience is important. So supply and demand. So the supply is super low. The demand, the most any given time, people buying gold and silver eagles combined in any given year is 35 to 65 million Americans. I would like to see that number in the last year because I know more people are buying silver than ever before, but it's not silver eagles, it's rounds, because the silver eagles are so inflated on the premium. And I know you guys are seeing that as well, but on the panda side, there are arguably, and I'm going to have to tone this back to be as conservative as possible. There's definitely 1 billion people in the panda market. Many know it's closer to 2 billion people in the audience. So you got such a tiny supply. And if we ever get a chance, we'd be honored to come back on the show and take it a little bit deeper. But one thing I'll let you know is what's going on in China and has been since 2012. They're making master board sets to put each and every year as a representation. The reason why folks in China are doing that is they're one of the very few programs in the world that change their designs every single year. The United States, when they make a new design, they run with it for 30 to 40 years with any coin we've ever seen in U.S. history. So
since we're coming up on an hour, it's been great. But as Eric just mentioned, if you guys want to have us back, we would definitely be thrilled to do that. As you can tell, we're extremely excited about what we do. We're passionate. Eric's an incredible fountain of knowledge, and I've been blessed to be under his tutelage for the last year plus. So thanks so much for having us. If you guys have any closing questions, we welcome that.
No, definitely. Thanks for coming on. There may be some closing comments. Like, I've always kind of stayed away from numismatics and collectibles. I think
That's good.
It's been really interesting learning from you guys. I think it's one of these things, you got to know what you're doing. I'm glad you guys are out there educating. But what I appreciate out of this discussion most of all is just the history of all these coins around the world. And if we are heading in the direction I think we are, where these things are returning as our money, I think having a piece of that history is really a cool thing. My mom actually has a bachelor dollar, which is a privately minted gold coin from back in what was this, 1700s, 1800s out in North Carolina.
Colonial money.
Yeah.
Eric could do a whole hour on that.
And it's a really neat piece of history. And I really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing a lot of this history with us and your perspective.
For sure. I love the educational aspect of it, because you guys are doing a lot of what Citizens for Sound Money is doing, and that's democratizing sound money is what I like to call it. You're not exclusive to just wealthy clients. You've let me buy stuff from you. So, I know it's you guys really love and have a passion for sharing it with more people rather than let's keep it exclusive to the ones that are already wealthy. So I appreciate that a lot. And we'll have information on how to get a hold of you guys in the show notes. If there's any pitch you want to make really quick, but most of the time you guys are bad at selling. I wouldn't say bad at selling. You're not aggressive. You're not aggressive at all. And you do the education piece, and you can tell the passion is there. You're so excited about it. So I hope we get back, but I'm glad Jim got to talk to you more than I did, since I get to know you guys in New Orleans. But if that's all, we'll wrap it up.
We're honored. And one thing I'd like to say on that note is, okay, so we do not discriminate. In fact, we have some really, 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 really mind-blowing young clients, which would shock you. I have a client as young as 12, but I do business with the entire family. And it's just beautiful to see these young children and young adults already focusing on this. But I want you guys to know, all the viewing audience, when I'm talking about the word numismatics and what defines a numismatic coin, the range on value that we have for our clients is $300. So far up to 10 million. That number will always grow. But many people think that you can't find something rare that's exactly, has all the attributes of what we were sharing earlier, and then that it's in the range of comfortability or budget-wise. So here's your number, $300. We have the best coins on earth that fit the profile of numismatics, starting at that low price. So no discrimination on who we're working with, and definitely no budget restrictions either.
And where can people find out more about you guys or get in contact? If you could share that with us.
Yes. So we have a website, and it's always under construction, but it's there. You can learn about us a little bit through that and see some of the information on what we're targeting. It's preferredcoinexchange.com. And then on that website, because that'll be the easiest thing for you guys to find us, get on that 800 number, and you're probably going to check in with Jim. We are all available for all our clients. And yes, we are not salespeople. We are consultants. That's why we are very passive. What we want to do most, and our number one mission, is educate all of you and answer questions. We're curious about your expectations and knowledge and wisdom, and we want to increase your knowledge and wisdom. So go onto the website, check it out, check that phone number out when you're ready to connect with us, and we'll make sure that you have an amazing experience, to say the least.
And if you don't have it, Marian, I can give you the 800 number right now. Do you want me to give it to you?
Sure.
For your notes, it's 866. This is toll free. 866-768-5047, and that is also on the website.
All right. Well, thanks. It's been great having you guys. Really appreciate,
Definitely.
like I said, the educational aspect and this idea about investing and the focus on precious metals is really great.
Excellent. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.